There is a particular kind of pressure that builds not from chaos but from concentration. Not the scattered pressure of a life pulling in too many directions at once, but the focused, gathering pressure of a sky that has been assembling its most significant forces in a single zone of the zodiac for weeks, stacking one planet on top of the next, one influence inside another, until the combined weight of it becomes something that you can feel in your body, even if you have never once in your life read an astrological chart. That is where you are standing today. April 15th, 2026. Not at the beginning of something, not at the end of something, but at the exact point of maximum pressure before the break. 6 planets in Aries. 6. Not 2, not 3, not the unusual grouping of 4 that astrologers usually regard as a stellium worth noting. 6 distinct planetary forces, each carrying its own principle, its own energetic signature, its own demands on the architecture of human consciousness, are all gathered in the same narrow band of the zodiac. The Sun, which governs your identity and the quality of your conscious will. Mercury, which entered Aries yesterday and is still vibrating with the shock of its own transition. Mars, the natural ruler of Aries, at home and operating with the particular intensity of a planet in its own sign. Saturn, which has been in these early degrees for months now, providing structural accountability to everything the sign attempts to begin. Neptune, which dissolved into Aries earlier this year and has been doing its slow dissolving work on the Aries principle of selfhood ever since. And Chiron, the wounded healer, which has been moving through Aries for years, tracing the long arc of collective and individual healing around the very nature of identity. When 6 planets occupy the same sign, the sign does not simply carry more energy, it carries a different kind. Something generated only when enough distinct forces are operating from the same foundational principle that their differences begin to produce a resonance rather than a conflict. Saturn and Neptune have been in a long tension in Aries, the structuring and the dissolving principles occupying the same territory simultaneously. Mars and Chiron have been in a conversation about what it means to act from a wounded place and what it means to act from a healed one. Mercury, freshly arrived, is still integrating the shock of Pisces and learning how to fire its language in this new environment. And the Sun moves through all of it, illuminating each planetary principle in turn. But beneath all of their individual differences, 6 planets in the same sign produces a unanimous signal, a direction that all of them are pointing toward, regardless of their particular function. And that direction is yours. The self, the beginning, the original impulse that precedes all conditioning. The place inside you where you exist before you learn to make yourself more manageable for the world around you. Today is the day when that original self is under the most pressure it has been under in a very long time. Not under threat, under invitation. The distinction matters. Because what breaks open today, in you and in the people around you and in the structures of your life, is not breaking from damage. It is breaking from the inside out, the way a seed breaks, the way any living thing breaks through the last layer of what was containing it before it finally had the size and the strength and the readiness to expand beyond it. You are breaking open. And the sky has assembled 6 witnesses in the sign of the self to confirm that this is exactly what is supposed to be happening. Your soul chose this lifetime with purpose. Your birth chart is the map. And right now, with 6 planets stacked in a single sign 2 days before a solar eclipse, the sky is speaking directly to whatever is written in your natal chart at these Aries degrees. A personal reading built from the exact moment and place of your birth decodes your true identity, surfaces hidden karmic patterns, and maps the major transits shaping your 2026 month by month. Delivered as an audio reading and a detailed PDF report to your inbox within 48 hours. The link is in the description below. The word stellium comes from the Latin for star cluster, and in astrological tradition it refers to a grouping of 3 or more planets in the same sign or house. 3 planets in a sign produces a notable emphasis. 4 is striking. 5 is rare enough that astrologers mark it in their records. 6 is the kind of configuration that appears in textbooks as an example of maximum concentration, the kind of sky that a practicing astrologer might encounter once or twice in an entire career and remember for the rest of their professional life. The last time 6 planets were stacked in Aries was not within recent memory. To have both inner and outer planets, both personal and transpersonal forces, gathered simultaneously in the same sign requires a particular alignment of orbital cycles that does not happen casually or frequently. What you need to understand about a 6-planet stellium is that it does not simply intensify the qualities of the sign. It creates a situation in which the entire range of human experience, from the most immediate and personal to the most collective and transpersonal, is filtered through a single lens. Every question about who you are, what you want, what you are willing to begin, what wounds need to be named, what structures are worth building, all of these are being asked simultaneously through the same fundamental principle. Aries is the principle of original selfhood. It is the first sign of the zodiac, carrying the energy of the first breath, of the pure unmediated impulse to exist before existence has learned to explain itself. Fire, cardinal energy, the energy of initiation of the first movement before form has settled into pattern. When 6 planets are gathered in Aries, the entire range of cosmic influence focuses on that single principle. Saturn asks what structures your authentic self needs in order to build something that lasts. Neptune asks what dreams your authentic self is being called to follow, even when they cannot be rationally defended. Mars asks what you are actually willing to act on, not talk about or plan, but act on. Mercury asks what you actually think, not what is polite or safe or strategic to say. Chiron asks where your authentic self has been wounded in its very sense of existing and whether you are ready to stop performing around that wound. And the Sun illuminates all of it simultaneously, bringing the conscious force of identity to bear on every one of these questions at once. That is a lot to be asking at the same time, and it is exactly why today carries the particular quality that it does. Not chaos, but the focused, demanding quality of a sky that has decided the time for preparation is finished and the time for the actual reckoning with selfhood has arrived. You cannot understand April 15th without understanding what is approaching on April 17th, the solar eclipse in Aries. This is not a regular new moon. A solar eclipse is a new moon at which the moon crosses the path of the sun, temporarily blocking the sun's light and creating a disruption in the usual lunar cycle that astrologers have understood for thousands of years to carry a quality of initiation that far exceeds what any ordinary new moon can produce. Solar eclipses initiate new chapters, not new days, not new weeks. New chapters, the kind that operate over 6 months to 2 years, that reconfigure the architecture of an entire area of your life rather than simply shifting its surface features. An eclipse in Aries initiates a new chapter in the territory of selfhood, identity, beginning, and personal direction. And this particular eclipse is happening inside a 6-planet stellium, which means the new chapter it is opening carries the full weight of all 6 planetary principles simultaneously. The pressure you're feeling today is the pressure of that approaching initiation. 2 days before a solar eclipse, the sky is in what astrologers call the eclipse corridor, the period of intensified energy that precedes the actual lunation, when the conditions of the new cycle are being set and the energies of the old cycle are completing themselves with a concentrated urgency that would not be present in an ordinary lunar month. Things that have been slow to resolve suddenly press for resolution. Choices that have been hovering at the edge of your attention suddenly demand a decision. Feelings that you've been managing successfully for months find themselves at the surface without your permission. This is not the eclipse doing something to you. This is the eclipse corridor, creating conditions in which what was already present in your life becomes impossible to continue looking past. The clarity of the pre-eclipse period is famous among those who work closely with lunar cycles. Not comfortable clarity, not the gentle clarity of a quiet morning and a cup of tea and sufficient time to think, the clarity that arrives like a hand on your shoulder, turning you firmly to face the thing you have been standing with your back to. The solar eclipse at 27 degrees of Aries carries the Sabian symbol of a large disappointed audience. This is one of the most arresting eclipse symbols in recent memory, and it deserves to be understood rather than glossed over. The disappointed audience is the crowd that came for a particular show, that had a specific performance in mind, that arrived with expectations already formed, and found instead something that did not match what they had prepared themselves to receive. The performer who produces this disappointment is not a failure. The performer is someone who, at the moment of the actual performance, chose authenticity over the expected role. The new chapter that begins for you in this eclipse is a chapter in which you disappoint the audience in precisely this way, in which you stop performing the version of yourself that the people around you, the structures you have been operating within, the roles you have been fulfilling, have come to count on. Not out of cruelty or carelessness, but because the 6 planets in Aries have been building for weeks to exactly this moment of reckoning, and what they are all pointing toward in their different registers and through their different demands is the same thing, that it is time to perform the actual self rather than the performed self. And the actual self, when it finally steps onto the stage, will not be what the audience was expecting. Today, 2 days before that eclipse, is the day when you can feel the approaching moment of choice. The moment when the stage direction is being written and you have not yet been handed the script, which means you still have the chance to insist that no script will be handed to you at all. That what happens when the eclipse arrives will not be a performance of anything. It will be an appearance, a genuine one, of you. Inside the 6-planet Stellium, 2 forces are doing something that deserves particular attention because they have been in Aries together for months, and their combined presence in this sign is one of the most paradoxical and productive configurations in the current sky. Saturn at approximately 7 degrees, Neptune at approximately 2 degrees. 2 planets separated by a few degrees, but in the same sign, operating on the same territory of selfhood from 2 radically different principles. Saturn is the principle of structure, of accountability, of the honest acknowledgement of limitation, and the disciplined work of building something within those limits that actually holds over time. Saturn in Aries is a demanding placement because it asks the principle of disciplined limitation to apply itself to the most undisciplined, most unlimited, most impulsively original energy in the zodiac. Saturn in Aries says, your individuality is real, your beginning is real, your fire is real, and now you're going to build something with it, rather than simply experience it. You are going to bring the honesty of real effort and real constraint, and real sustained attention to bear on the questions of who you are and what you are starting. The fire will not save you from the work. The fire is the beginning of the work. Neptune is the principle of dissolution, of vision, of the permeability that makes mystical awareness possible and that also makes practical functioning more difficult. Neptune in Aries dissolves the edges of the self in the same territory that Saturn is trying to structure. It brings dream quality and spiritual receptivity and the capacity for selfless action to a sign that is fundamentally oriented towards self-definition and individual assertion. Neptune in Aries asks, what if the self you are so urgently trying to begin is not as separate from everything around it as you have assumed? What if the fire that feels so personally yours is actually a fire you are carrying on behalf of something larger? These 2 questions, Saturn's demand for honest disciplined structure and Neptune's invitation into a larger dissolution of the bounded self, are both present simultaneously in the Aries territory of your chart. And they are not, at the level of their deepest function, opposed to each other. They are asking the same question from different angles. Saturn asks it through accountability. Neptune asks it through surrender. But both of them are asking what your authentic self actually looks like when it has been both honestly constructed and honestly dissolved. When you have done the work and let go of the result. When you have built something and offered it to something beyond yourself. Today, with the Sun at 25 degrees of Aries and 6 planets stacked across the span of this sign, the Saturn-Neptune conversation is alive inside the larger stellium, adding depth and paradox to everything the sky is asking of you. You are being asked to build something and to hold it loosely, to begin deliberately and to trust where the beginning leads beyond your intention, to be disciplined and to be permeable, to know who you are, and to be willing to have that knowing dissolved and reformed by what the eclipse and the new cycle reveal. This is not a contradiction. It is the full range of what genuine beginning actually requires. Not just the fire of the start, the accountability of the sustained effort and the spiritual surrender of not controlling where the sustained effort ultimately takes you. While the 6-planet stellium in Aries gathers its extraordinary concentration of fire and initiation and pressure and healing and vision and discipline into this single zone of the zodiac, one planet is doing something different. One planet is not in Aries. One planet is standing outside the gathering with its feet on the ground and its attention on what is actually worth having. Venus in Taurus is one of the most grounded and reliable placements in astrology. Venus rules Taurus. This means that in this sign, Venus is fully at home, operating with its natural intelligence and its natural sense of what has genuine value. In Taurus, Venus does not rush. It does not get caught up in the urgency of fire or the enthusiasm of beginnings or the exciting pressure of an approaching eclipse. It stays with what it can feel is real, what the body knows, what the senses confirm, what has genuine nourishing substance beneath its surface rather than simply an arresting quality of excitement or intensity. At approximately 17 degrees of Taurus, Venus is sitting in a sextile relationship to Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter at approximately 17 degrees of Cancer is the planet of expansion, of faith, of the larger meaning that gives individual events their context and their purpose. A sextile is an aspect of opportunity, of two planets making themselves available to each other across a distance that invites rather than demands connection. The Venus-Jupiter sextile in earth and water is a genuinely nourishing aspect, a quiet but real source of emotional and material sustenance operating beneath the louder story of the Aries stellium. What this means practically is this: while the 6 planets in Aries are pressing you toward the break, toward the moment of authentic appearance that the eclipse is approaching, Venus in Taurus is holding a steady question underneath all of that urgency. What do you actually want to build? Not what are you fired up about, not what are you being pushed toward, not what does the pressure of 6 planets demand that you begin, but what do you genuinely want? What has real nourishing substance to you? What, if you set down the excitement and the urgency and the pressure of the approaching eclipse for a moment and simply asked your body what it recognizes as genuinely worth having, would you find yourself reaching toward? Venus in Taurus is the part of this week's sky that is not interested in the performance of beginning. It is interested in the genuinely valuable thing that the beginning is in service of. And it is reminding you with the quiet steadiness that Taurus always carries, that the break that is coming, the opening that the 6 planets are pressing you toward, is not an end in itself. It is a means. The question Venus asks is, a means to what? What is the life, the love, the creative work, the genuine condition of existence that you are breaking toward? What does it feel like? Not in the excited register of Aries fire, but in the settled, embodied, genuinely confirmed register of Taurus Earth. The Jupiter sextile from Cancer adds one more dimension. Jupiter in Cancer is the principle of expansion applied to the domain of emotional belonging, of home, of the deep sense of being genuinely held and nourished by the conditions of your life and the people within it. The sextile between Venus in Taurus and Jupiter in Cancer is a gentle but real message from the sky. The break that is coming, the opening, the authentic appearance that the eclipse will catalyze, is worth making not because it will be dramatic or powerful or even impressive. It is worth making because on the other side of it is a version of your life that feels more like home, that nourishes rather than depletes, that holds you in the genuine warmth of belonging rather than the exhausting performance of fitting in. Venus in Taurus keeps the brake aimed at what is real, at what is genuinely worth the cost of the opening. Without Venus in Taurus as the anchor of this week, the Aries stellium could produce fire without direction, beginning without substance, urgency without genuine purpose. With Venus in Taurus present, unsteady and in sextile to an expansive Jupiter in Cancer, the break that is coming is aimed at something worth breaking toward. Every sign of the zodiac is experiencing the weight of 6 planets in Aries differently, through a different house of the chart, a different domain of life, a different set of questions about where the break is coming and what is opening on the other side. Understanding where this pressure is landing for your sign gives you the map for where to pay closest attention in the days ahead. For Aries, the 6-planet stellium lands directly in your first house of self and identity. This is the most personally intense placement of the stellium for any sign. The break that is coming is a break in how you have been presenting yourself to the world, and what opens on the other side is you, more fully and honestly present than you have been in a very long time. For Taurus, the stellium occupies your 12th house, the house of the hidden, the private, what you have carried beneath the surface without bringing it into the light. The pressure you feel may not be visible to those around you, but it is real. Something held in the private interior, a truth, a wound, a direction that has been waiting, is about to surface. For Gemini, the stellium falls in your 11th house of community, shared vision, and belonging. The pressure is around whether the groups, friendships, and collective projects in your life actually reflect who you genuinely are. The break for Gemini is a shift toward the people and visions that actually match your frequency. For Cancer, the stellium activates your 10th house of public life, career, and visible contribution. The pressure has accumulated in your professional domain, and the break coming is a step into a more authentic version of your professional self. The eclipse at the top of your chart is a moment of genuine public emergence. For Leo, the stellium falls in your 9th house of philosophy, belief, and the frameworks through which you understand what life actually means. What breaks open for Leo is an assumption, a long-held belief about how life works or what is possible for you. The eclipse here initiates a new philosophical chapter. For Virgo, the stellium occupies your 8th house of transformation and depth. The 8th house does not deal in surface adjustments, and the pressure for Virgo is among the most intense in the zodiac right now. What breaks open is something that needed to release in order for something genuinely new to grow. For Libra, the stellium falls in your 7th house of partnership and significant relationships. The pressure has been gathering around how you show up with the people who matter most, what you bring to partnership, and what you have needed but not asked for. The break for Libra is a shift in the fundamental dynamic of your closest connections. For Scorpio, the stellium falls in your 6th house of daily life, health, and work, in the ordinary sense of how you spend your hours. The pressure has gathered around whether your daily structures genuinely support who you are, or whether they have calcified into habits that were useful once. The break for Scorpio is a shift in how the day is organized and what it is in service of. For Sagittarius, the stellium occupies your 5th house of creative expression and genuine joy. The pressure has gathered around whether you are allowing yourself the creative freedom your nature requires, or managing it in service of something more socially acceptable. The break for Sagittarius is a creative release into making something genuinely yours. For Capricorn, the stellium falls in your 4th house of home, deep emotional foundation, and the private interior life beneath everything you build outwardly. The break for Capricorn is a foundational one, not a collapse, but a recognition that the ground beneath what you have been constructing needs to shift in order for what is built to genuinely hold. For Aquarius, the stellium is in your 3rd house of communication, ideas, and daily exchange. The pressure has gathered around what you communicate and what you have been avoiding saying, the conversations you have been having, and the ones you have been holding back. Something that has needed to be said is pressing toward the surface. For Pisces, the stellium falls in your 2nd house of worth, resources, and the fundamental question of what you believe you deserve. The pressure has gathered around whether the material conditions of your life actually reflect your depth of value, or whether you have been underselling yourself in ways that are no longer sustainable. The eclipse here initiates a new cycle of claiming what you are genuinely worth. The day before a major event carries its own particular quality. Not the event itself and not the days before the event became clearly imminent, but the final 24 hours when the thing that is approaching is close enough to be felt in the body but has not yet arrived. When you are still technically in the before, but the before has acquired the particular charge density of a space that knows it is about to end. April 15th, 2026 is that day. Everything that is going to break open in your life is not broken open yet. The eclipse has not arrived. The solar eclipse that will initiate the new chapter, that will catalyze the authentic appearance, that will set into motion the longer cycle of selfhood and beginning that the entire Aries stellium has been building toward, is 2 days away. You are in the final hours of standing inside the pressure without yet having the release. This is, in its own way, one of the most significant moments of the entire sequence, because the person you are in these final hours before the break is the person who will determine the quality of the break itself. The awareness you bring to this pressure, the honesty with which you hold what is asking to be released, the clarity, not comfortable clarity, but honest clarity, with which you name to yourself what you know needs to end, what needs to begin, what has been performing and what wants to simply appear. These things are not waiting for the eclipse to be decided. They are being decided right now. Pluto at 5 degrees of Aquarius is holding a sextile to the entire Aries stellium. A sextile from Pluto is an offer, not a push. An offer of access to a depth of transformative power that is not available in ordinary conditions. What is being offered in this final day before the eclipse is the capacity to let the break go all the way down rather than simply to the first layer of what has been ready to change. You do not have to be content with a partial break. You do not have to immediately begin rebuilding familiar walls around the opening before the new air has fully entered. The sextile from Pluto is an invitation to let the transformation be genuinely transformative. The moon in Aries today is adding its waning crescent light to the stellium, the final lunar energy before the eclipse. New moon arrives and resets the entire cycle. A waning crescent moon is a moon of release, of completion, of the final metabolizing of everything the preceding lunar cycle brought to light. With the moon waning in Aries, the release today is personal. It is in the territory of identity and self and beginning. What you are releasing in these final hours before the eclipse is the last attachment to the version of yourself you have been before the break. The last familiar remnant of the person who was performing rather than appearing. The last defensive structure around the self that was in place because the world around you had particular expectations and you had learned over years to protect yourself by meeting them. The waning crescent moon in Aries is the final exhale before everything opens. And the quality of that exhale, whether it is full or partial, whether it releases everything that is ready to release, or holds back the pieces that are most familiar and most frightening to let go of, determines the quality of the inhale that follows. The eclipse inhale, the new chapter beginning. Everything that is breaking open today and in the days immediately ahead is breaking because it has outgrown the container that was holding it. Not because the container was wrong, not because it failed, but because you grew inside it until the container could no longer accommodate the size of what you have become. And a container that cannot accommodate you is not a container that is serving you. It is a container that is restraining you. And the 6 planets in Aries, the approaching solar eclipse, the pressure of this final pre-eclipse day, all of it together has been building precisely to the moment when the restraint releases. What breaks open in you in the days surrounding this eclipse is not something external. It is your own sense of permission. Permission to be the size you actually are. Permission to take up the space that your genuine self requires. Permission to begin what you have been sensing you needed to begin for months, perhaps for years, without waiting for the conditions to be perfect for the audience to be ready, for the path to be entirely clear before you step onto it. The 6 planets in Aries are permission. They are the sky's way of assembling every available force in the territory of self and beginning and saying collectively, now. Not tomorrow, not when the conditions improve, not when you have processed a little more and prepared a little longer and worked a little harder to be ready. Now. The readiness is not going to arrive before the beginning. The readiness is a product of the beginning. You become ready by beginning, by letting the break happen and discovering that what is on the other side of it is not the chaos you feared, but the particular quality of spaciousness that only comes from finally outgrowing the container. What the break becomes in the weeks and months that follow the eclipse is a chapter, a genuine new chapter of your life, not simply a new page of the same chapter. The Aries stellium initiates something that operates on an 18-month to 2-year cycle, the natural lifespan of an eclipse chapter. Over that cycle, what began in the break becomes a direction. What was only a moment of authentic appearance becomes a sustained way of being. What was initially a release of the performed self becomes the ongoing reality of a life built from the genuine one. The solar eclipse at 27 degrees of Aries is the formal beginning of this chapter. But the chapter begins in the break that is already happening, in the pressure that you are already inside, in the awareness that you are carrying right now about what needs to be released and what needs to be allowed to begin. The eclipse will formalize it. The stellium has already initiated it. You are already in the break. The 6 planets have been building this across the entire month of April. And the work they have been doing in you, the questioning, the restructuring, the dissolving, the honest accounting, the wound touching, the illuminating, all of that work is already done. The break is not coming. The break is here. What breaks open in you in the days surrounding this eclipse is not something external. It is your own sense of permission. Permission to be the size you actually are. To take up the space your genuine self requires. To begin what you have been sensing needed to begin for months, without waiting for the conditions to be perfect, the audience to be ready, the path to be entirely clear before you step onto it. The 6 planets in Aries are permission. They are the sky assembling every available force in the territory of self, and beginning and saying collectively now. The readiness is not going to arrive before the beginning. The readiness is a product of the beginning. You become ready by beginning, by letting the break happen and discovering that what is on the other side is not chaos but the particular spaciousness that only comes from finally outgrowing the container. 6 planets in Aries, an eclipse 2 days away, a break that has already begun, and on the other side of all of it, a version of your life that has always been waiting for you to become large enough to step into it. You are large enough. You have been large enough for a long time. The sky today is simply making it impossible to pretend otherwise. Let it break. Let it open. Let what has been containing you dissolve under the combined weight of 6 planets doing the work they were assembled to do. And then let yourself appear fully on the other side of the opening in the first real breath of the chapter that is beginning. That is today, April 15th, 2026. Not the beginning and not the end. The exact point of the break. And the break is the most important moment of all, because it is the moment when what was becomes what is, and what is, finally and completely and without apology, becomes yours. Thank you for being here today. If this message landed somewhere real for you, leave a comment below and subscribe so you are here for everything the sky brings next. The eclipse is 2 days away, and what follows it will be one of the most significant sequences of this entire year.